Period Positive Children. Salam and peace. This is Chantal, founder of Honored Moon, author of, I have to show it now, Peaceful Periods, Holistic Womb Care for Teens. And today I'm going live with my sister, Amira Zaki, to talk about raising period positive children. So I'm going to add her to join the conversation. To use the question bubble. I did get a few questions in advance, so we'll do our best to get to them today. And get started. Let me know how many of you have children. I'd be interested in knowing how many parents are here today. Are you raising sons and daughters or just daughters? Bismillah. Inshallah, the request goes through without a hitch. And also, if you want to share the ages of your children, I'd be really interested if most of you, if some of you present are parents. Are you parents of younger children, teenagers? So feel free to put that in a comment if you are a parent trying your best to raise period positive children. So I'll keep trying to add Amira. Unable to join. Let's try again. Bismillah. Same thing happened. Just daughters, 3 and 10. Nice. Turned on video. Okay.
Alaikum Chantal, can you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Okay.
But I do hear you well then. Nice and clear.
On and off again. Is it working now?
I don't see you yet.
Okay.
But your sound is coming in clear. Do others hear Sister Amira as well? Or does anyone else see Sister Amira other than me? Let me know in the comments if you're seeing her or just hearing her like I am. And we see both. Oh, awesome. Okay.
Okay, great.
So some other people see you. Oh, that's cool. That's interesting that I can't see you though. Let me see if there's. Okay, we can see and hear Amira. Alhamdulillah. Okay, excellent. So let me see if I can move this on. All right, so I think we can get started. Can you see me, Amira?
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you, Chantal.
Oh, wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Bismillah. Let's get it going. How are you today?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Disappointed that I can't see you, but as long as others are seeing you, inshallah, it's all good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for wanting to have this conversation with me about raising period positive children. I was making the flyer and I started to put period positive daughters. I was like, no, period positive children. This is for everybody.
It's much
So do you
yeah,
mind?
I agree.
Yeah. So do you mind introducing yourself to folks who have not met you yet?
Yes, so I'm Amira Zaki and I am a certified sex educator and an expert in helping women to overcome a painful sexual condition known as vaginismus. And I have a range of online courses for women, men, and kids in terms of sex education in a God-conscious way.
Thank you so much. So this conversation, obviously, it oftentimes begins with our own stories. So how do you feel about sharing your experience? Were you raised in a period positive household?
I'm going to go ahead and say no. Based on my view of period positivity now, thinking back about my own childhood and how I was raised in terms of my ideas about my period, my level of education from my family and my school and my community, I would say I wasn't raised to be period positive. I wouldn't say there was anything specifically done to make me feel completely negative about my period, but at the same time, I wasn't raised I wasn't raised to have this positive mindset with regards to getting my period and having a period. So yeah, I'm going to say no, I don't think I was raised period positively.
I mean, it's challenging if you're not raised in a larger period positive culture. So I would say the same. I wouldn't say that I was raised in a period positive family. Um, you know, just a very recent memory came to me. So I always tell people that my mom gave me two books about puberty and menstruation.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me to let her know if I had any questions. And I'm pretty sure she told me where she keeps menstrual pads if I needed them. But it wasn't a conversation. It was really, here are some books. Let me know if you have questions.
Mm-hmm.
And but then a recent memory came up for me where I don't know if it's like this in the UK, but in the US, sometimes we have these magazines for teens or for youth, and there'll be like a postcard that'll say, if you want this like free book or some kind of offer, this free period kit, you fill out the postcard and you mail it in. Maybe I'm just aging myself.
No, not at all. I actually know what you're talking about. Yeah, we do have similar things like that in the UK. I don't know if they're present nowadays. I don't think I've seen any of those. I mean, they probably are, but I don't read a lot of magazines nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I know what you're talking about in teen magazines. Yeah.
It probably everything is digital and
Exactly.
scanning QR codes and stuff.
Exactly.
But I have a vague memory that I might have been the one who completed this postcard to get these books. I feel like they were free books because I feel like they were really thin. It wasn't like a purchased book that I could think of. It was
Yeah.
like a pamphlet almost. So I'm wondering if it was a free thing that I got from a magazine. And so, so both of my parents are Jamaican, and I was born after they migrated to New York City. And when I speak to my other friends and peers who are also Caribbean, they similarly tell me that they were not really, well, some tell me that they weren't told about their period at all. They literally just saw blood and thought they were bleeding or dying or,
Yeah.
you know, injured, or if there was some kind of emergency. And so I know some of my peers had zero period education. And then the rest of us, you know, probably mostly got it from school. And the messaging from school, I wouldn't say is period positive at all. It's kind of like, brace yourself. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, you know, for those of us who don't come from cultures that still have practices that are celebratory around periods, then, you know,
Yeah.
not being period positive is probably the default for most of us.
I agree. And the thing that came up for me when you just mentioned school is I feel like our school did teach us about getting a period, what to expect, how to manage pain, how to, you know, different products that you can use to absorb the period blood, which was fine. But I feel like it was very detached from the sanctity and this kind of sacredness of the period that was completely not there. And I'm not saying that it's the school's job to put that there, but I just feel like the way it was taught to me personally is, this is your period, this is what to expect when you get your period. It's something that happens to you, it's not really happening for you, it's something you have to put up with and tolerate. It's something that only girls go through, or girls and women go through. And kind of like, boys are lucky that they don't have to deal with this mess. And that's kind of how it was like described, I guess, is like this messy process that you have to go through once a month for several days. And if you get it, make sure you don't leak, because then that's shameful and embarrassing. And if you use period products, hide them. So it was just, yeah, it felt icky. That was kind of the messaging I got from school. I personally didn't have much of an education from my parents about my period, apart from my mum just once telling me about my period, and that's about it. And I remember, I think even saying to her, I was like, it's okay, mum, I actually know about it already, I've learned about it from school. And she kind of didn't go any further. She was like, oh, okay, school's taken care of. And she probably felt relief, I think, based on her own upbringing. My mum is from Thailand. She probably also didn't have that many conversations about her own period and those kind of intimate topics. And so I feel like she probably, yeah, felt that sense of relief that, oh, someone else is teaching my daughter about it, I don't have to worry about this. But yeah, I feel like it was just this thing that no one really ever wanted to talk about. And I remember feeling very, very odd whenever I couldn't pray. So much so that we had to kind of have these kind of code sentences in my family, because I'm one of three other sisters, so there's four of us girls growing up in my household. My brother came along a little bit later, but four of us girls, and all of us getting our periods at different times. But my family raised us to pray together as a family, which we all really loved and really enjoyed and benefited from. And usually it was my dad leading the prayer. And I remember like me and my sisters, we didn't do this intentionally, it just kind of came about. We had to have a code sentence to say to my dad for him to understand that we're not praying. And my dad is very open-minded and understanding, and he's Egyptian, but even he didn't talk to us about our period, and the code sentence was just simply, I'm not praying. And I think as soon as he heard that, he instantly knew, and he was like, okay. But it's just like, we couldn't actually say I'm on my period, or I'm not praying because I'm on my period. It was just keep it short and simple, I'm not praying. And it's like, as soon as he said that, he got it, and anyone else in the family also got it. But yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. I'm not sure about anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you mentioned about your mother and her own upbringing, that she probably didn't have any, like, a significantly different experience. And I'm thinking about the same about my mom, because my grandparents migrated to the US first. And so when my mom was a teenager, kind of in her formative years, like adolescence to teenagehood, her parents were not with her. So she was being raised by her, a combination of like her nanny, her grandmother, and her big sister.
Yeah.
And I don't know what her initiation was. And so when my own daughter, my eldest daughter is turning 13, inshallah, in December.
Mm-hmm.
And when I shared the fact that she started her period earlier this year with my mom, I asked my mom, do you have any recollection of any traditions in Jamaica around the period, around celebrating it or acknowledging it? She was like, no, I don't, but I'll get back to you. So she contacts her elder cousins, and she also contacts her sister-in-law, my stepfather's sister, and she asks, like, do you have any recollection? And they all said, no, we don't know of anything in our heritage or culture around celebrating the first period. And my mom said to me, you have to remember, like, we third world people, there are a lot of taboos that we couldn't talk about openly. And I even see it in lesser things. My grandmother, I used to just ask my grandmother questions like, how did you meet my grandfather? And after a while, she'd ask me, like, why are you asking these questions? Why are you asking all these questions? Or if I asked that was my maternal grandmother, when I would ask my paternal grandmother about different stories she would share about her upbringing. And I was like, well, did you ever wonder this or that? She said, we couldn't ask questions. We couldn't ask questions when I was younger. So there's a lot of filling in the dots of stories, because things were not talked about. And so I'm curious for you, how did that shape your relationship with your period growing up? And then how did that change when you became a parent?
I think it's interesting that as I regularly got my period, especially in my kind of teens and early 20s, it's actually something that I, inside myself, would look forward to, even though I couldn't explicitly say that to anyone else. Inside my own head and inside my own body, the way I would feel is I would actually look forward to getting my period, regardless of what time of year it was. So for example, in a regular kind of time of year, so not including Ramadan right now, I would actually look forward to getting my period, because it would be that time when I didn't have to worry about remembering to pray on time. And so for me, it was always like this kind of little bit of stress of like remembering to pray on time, and sometimes the physical nature of having to pray. I would actually look forward to that as this permission that you don't have to pray. Yes, I can engage in other forms of worship, but it was just this, and it's an indicator of my spiritual relationship with God, going through from my teens to early 20s. It was something I would look forward to, but I felt like I would feel too guilty to say that. I felt like, oh my God, if I say I'm actually looking forward to my period because I don't have to pray, what kind of bad person am I, sort of thing. And now it's similar, but not, but different. I still look forward to getting my period for a similar reason, but not with the same mindset of thinking, oh, I'm so bad that I actually look forward to not having to pray. It's actually, I look forward to that that kind of inner time of like when you get your period, of just kind of going more inwardly, having time to rest, having time to explore other ways to develop your spiritual connection with God. So yeah, it just felt like it was something shameful to talk about. It was shameful to talk about having a period in the first place, but also shameful for me to even mention that actually I'm really happy I'm on my period. And then there were also people, I remember lots of girls growing up talking about their periods being very painful. And I was very fortunate that I have, alhamdulillah, throughout my life, I've never experienced extremely painful periods. I have experienced uncomfortable periods, or like kind of like this dull sensation in that region, my womb region. But when I compared myself to some of the other girls that were going through really painful periods and having to take painkillers for their periods, I felt like I didn't have a place to talk about how my period was fine, because I felt like that might make the other girls feel bad. So yeah, I just feel like, and then talking about Ramadan, it was a similar situation growing up in my household, where when we would get our periods, we couldn't really mention the fact that we weren't fasting because of our periods. We just kind of just didn't really eat in front of anyone. And you know, that's how it was kind of growing up. Now it's different. Now that I'm married and have my own home and have my own kids, I kind of decided to set the rules with regards to how that's going to go about. So if I'm on my period during Ramadan, I can eat in my house wherever I want, being mindful of the fact that my husband is usually fasting, and just being considerate to the fact that eating in front of him may make things a bit more difficult for him, but it's not that I have to hide in front of him. It's not something that's shameful, or you know, something that I'm doing wrong. So yeah, I think that's kind of the contrast between what it was like growing up in a household that didn't necessarily say that having your period is bad, but at the same time didn't really celebrate it, to now me consciously deciding that I want my daughter to have positive feelings about her getting her period. So she is anticipating her period. She's 10, she hasn't had her period yet, but I feel like, and I personally don't know of any traditions from Thailand or Egypt with regards to a girl getting her first period. So I feel like I'm going to need to work with my daughter to come up with our own tradition that we start, and then she can, inshallah, continue. Yeah, so that's where things are at right now for me.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really exciting to think about. I think for me, similarly, I think the thing, well, I wasn't raised Muslim, so that's insightful for me, because I hear my daughter say that sometimes, and I can hear her kind of like, you know, she's very open about it, and she I think she does feel a sense of relief that she doesn't have to pray, and at first I was kind of, you know, the way that she said it, I was talking to her and I was like, you know, well, it's okay for you to feel that. I don't want you to feel something that you don't feel, but you just have adab, like have manners, like, you know, be mindful of how you express that. You know, so she actually, yeah, she looks forward. She's very happy to have her period. She's happy for me when I have mine. Like, it's just like period party, you know, when, and then we were like, this is the second menstrual cycle where we both overlapped days, and she just thinks it's the coolest thing that we're cycling together, you know. So thank you for, you know, just your transparency with that there is a little bit of, you know, that you have this sense of like, okay, I don't have to be as mindful of keeping the prayer, you know, and there are certain things to that too, where I do, like, I became Muslim when I was 19, so I was already menstruating, and I think by that time, the way that menstruation was introduced to me from an Islamic lens was all the things that you can't do, you know, like, oh, you know, can we be in the masjid? Can we be in the prayer hall? Can we touch the mushaf? Can we recite the Quran? Like, the introduction about, or the orientation to menstruation that I got when I became Muslim and started participating in the Muslim community was like all of the things that menstruation took you from or took away from you, not what it gave to you, not what it brought to you. And so I think that framing is really important. Like, what's the foundational messaging that you're starting with? And so for me, as a parent now, it was really important to me that I make sure my daughter knows that periods are something positive. I think for me, the thing that I concealed from my peers when I was a teen, I did not have periods every month. I had very irregular periods. And so that was like my luck, you know. People would say, oh, you're lucky, or I wouldn't talk about it a lot because I knew some people were really struggling, right? I have had difficult periods, but I was not struggling with it in the same way that they were. And then by the time I became more aware of holistically how important a period was, because I think when you learn about your period as something unimportant, as something you just have to deal with, then when it's showing you all of these shades or variations of unhealthy, it doesn't really call your attention because you don't see how it's an asset to your health or a value to your health. So because I have this, you know, this idea that, oh, it's not really important, it's just this thing that we go through. And then when I met a doctor and I told her about my periods being irregular, or you know, not coming regularly on a monthly basis, there's just a lot of belittling, like, oh, it's no big deal. I remember being told, as long as you have 4 periods a year, it's no big deal. And it's like, you really think that that's not an indication that something in the female body is not operating optimally when you're not bleeding on a regular basis, the lining is not shedding, or you're not ovulating on a regular basis? And so I think if this is coming from medical doctors, then it reinforces the cultural disregard for menstruation, right? That's like compounded with like medically.
Women's health.
Exactly. And every so often we have these articles coming out. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Women don't need to menstruate at all, basically telling women that, you know, the breakthrough bleeding you have so the fact is that when you're on birth control, you get some breakthrough bleeding. It is not a period. So there's misinformation from doctors telling you that it'll regulate your period, but you don't have a period at all. You just have these placebo pills where you get a breakthrough bleed. But it's not the bleeding that comes from ovulating and releasing and shedding lining. But the other misinformation we get from doctors is that unless you're trying to have a baby, you don't need to menstruate every month. And to think that the female body is only reduced to what it can produce is really insulting. And it's very damaging, right?
I've heard of some women, when they do take things like the pill and have the breakthrough bleeding, well, in their mind, they think it's a period, so they will use the language of I'm on my period or I'm having my period. But I've heard a lot of them describe just how intense it is when that period does come. For those women that I've spoken to, I'm not sure if that applies to every woman. I'm assuming it doesn't apply to every woman, but the women I've had these conversations with, is that breakthrough bleeding or period in their minds that they get is very intense, very painful when they compare it to actual periods they've had in the past before going on the pill. What are the reasons for that?
Because, you know, the thing is, oftentimes, especially if birth control was prescribed for other reasons other than contraception, you know, then basically it's masking the hormonal issues that are already there, right? So basically you have the taking of the pill, which is just trying to mask, but there's underlying issues that are already there, right? If there is, because sometimes that breakthrough bleeding, if your uterus knows that it's releasing and there's a lot to release, right? If there's clotted blood, if there's old blood, stagnant blood, your body is going to work hard to get rid of it. And just to think about, when we think about endometriosis or fibroids or even cysts, it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that that regular cleansing and shedding of the uterine lining is going to be protective against those issues, right? When you're not having a real true release or consistent release and shedding of the womb's lining, then you can imagine how the lining can be too thick, or there can be, you know, fibroids and other things kind of growing because there isn't this routine healthy shedding and cleansing happening.
I
And
love that I love that you've mentioned all of those various different conditions that a lot of women are struggling with nowadays. It seems that it's becoming more prevalent. I'm not sure because I don't have statistics, but just based from the work I do, and I know that it's the work you do as well, I've just seen a lot of women mention these conditions. But, you know, given the fact that I help women with sexual conditions or sexual pain or intimacy or sexual issues, a lot of them will bring up those conditions that you've mentioned, endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, etc. And a lot of them will have an impact on their ability to enjoy sex or their ability to overcome pain and things like that. And so just kind of bringing it back to what we are discussing today is one of the main reasons I love the work you do, and that I'm grateful that my work kind of has an overlap with your work, even though your work is a lot broader in terms of the hormonal side of things and in terms of period care. But one of the aims, I'm sure, of you doing this work is you wanting to prevent girls and who are becoming women from experiencing those conditions in the first place, which is down to the of spreading the importance of them taking care of their womb health. So that, I think, would start from them, you know, having a period positive education, which will enable them and empower them to take charge and take care of their own womb health. And actually, someone just asked in the comments, I'm not sure if you saw it because it went up, but I stopped on it. It's this person here said, I'd love to hear your insight on how to approach a teen who is resistant to any positive period talk. How would you respond to that?
yeah, I often find that it's the mothers of teens who are especially desperate. They're like trying to throw their kids at me, like throw their daughters, like, can you talk to her? She doesn't listen to me anymore. She doesn't want to hear anything I have to say. And I do think there is a missed window of opportunity where if we can have the right messaging and information about menstruation, like I think 10 to 12 is really a sweet spot. Depending on the child, it could be a little bit earlier. But there's a time that I notice because I teach workshops. I've taught workshops to preteens and teens, and the preteen workshops are actually so much more engaging and fun because they're so curious. They don't have all of the stigma and shame yet. But once girls already start menstruating, and some have even researched that usually when I think this is studied on American youth, that after puberty, before puberty, males and females tend to have a comparable level of self-esteem. But what they notice after puberty, for girls, their self-esteem plummets, and for boys, it rises a bit. And so some have theorized that this plummeting has to do with the period, right? This is one of the major differences. The physical differences, you know, as you mature are gradual, but then having to menstruate and then possibly the stress and strain and shame of trying to conceal this natural thing that your body is doing every month becomes a source of, like, you know, loss of self-esteem. And so I think that by the time I start talking to teens, they've already internalized a certain amount of shame about their periods. Talking about it is very difficult. Asking questions is very difficult. They ask very few questions in workshops, and you would think that, oh, they're older, they're experiencing menstruation, they should have these really rich, engaging questions, but it's actually the younger ones who, they don't have all of those barriers yet. So I find that they're very open and they're very receptive to putting into practice to prepare themselves. And then when they start menstruating, they're like, oh yeah, I learned about these teas. I learned I should do this. Like, there's just a certain eagerness and a curiosity that I think it really gets captivated at a certain age. And so, yeah, when it comes to teens, I think I think that's the time where they probably, if they've already closed off to the parents, that's when they actually need to be learning with and from other mentors and peers, because I think that's when they're ready to have those kind of parallel conversations or like adjacent conversations with their non-parent, because they say from like a evolutionary biology perspective, they say that there is an age where there is an inclination to push away from the family unit because that's what drives people to like go outside of their tribe and move outside of their communities and get to know and mingle and interact with other people. Evolutionists will say it's so that they don't inbreed and like stay within the clan or the tribe and not get to know who's outside of the tribe and get to know who's outside of the community. So Allah knows best on that. but I wanted to come back to your point about the menstrual health challenges and reproductive health challenges. So in the foreword of my book,
Can you share your book? Just share it on the screen. Everyone needs to know about your book. I can't wait to receive my copy. What is the official release date? It's soon, right?
It was Wednesday.
Today. Oh my God, okay.
Yeah, so
I can't wait to receive mine. I know mine's on the way, inshallah, but ever since you told me about your book, I've been looking forward to this. And everyone here listening live and watching the replay, get the book. Peaceful Periods, Holistic Womb Care for Teens. And you've written this in the language that teens are able to absorb, right? You're not writing this for the parents, you're writing this for the teens to be able to read themselves.
Yes, it's written for preteens and teens. And the reality is it's going to also be like a massive re-education for the parents as well. But the reading level is a 5th grade reading level. So very appropriate for preteens and teens if they are already menstruating or about to start menstruating. This is information they should have and they should know. So the doctor who wrote the foreword is a phenomenal, we call it, she's a reproductive endocrinologist here in the US. And she makes a really brilliant point in the foreword where she says that she sees all of it. She sees all of the reproductive health challenges. And she has this amazing clinic where they employ only alternative holistic modules and modalities of care. So they have a vaginal steaming practitioner. They have a nutritionist, a meditation practitioner. She's also an acupuncturist and prescribes traditional Chinese medicine herbs. She does the whole thing, right? And one thing she said in this book was that she's seen a lot. And she said the root of all of those reproductive health challenges are all rooted in menstrual dysfunction. You don't go from having a healthy period every month and then one day, surprise, you have endometriosis, or one day, surprise, you have fibroids. It's the ignoring of the monthly menstrual issues that your doctors told you that's just your burden of being a woman, or your culture has told you you just have to endure it and suck it up. Those menstrual imbalances on a month-to-month basis just get compounded, or they get ignored if you're on birth control. If you're put on birth control, then those menstrual imbalances just kind of get masked over. And it really does compound until one day you have this whole issue. And I think what you said is so important, because for some women, their issues around pleasure and around intimacy could be it may not be as psychological. For some, it's psychological, right? Their psychological mindset around intimacy creates this reaction in their body where they're tensing up involuntarily. But for some people, if you have fibroids growing inside of your womb, you are going to have pain, right? If you have adhesions and tissue that's growing where it's not supposed to be growing, you're going to experience pain. I'll never forget one woman that I know. She actually guest taught a workshop for one of my courses. She overcame endometriosis. And she said it used to feel like barbed wire in her pelvis. And she would feel it when she moved her bowels. She would also feel it when she would orgasm. So she was married and in a relationship. And can you imagine that that's the reaction? All of that tissue and overgrowth and adhesions and all of that old stagnant blood and misplaced tissue just creating such a tension in your body that even what should be pleasurable is constrained and it's challenged, and it's the extreme opposite. I never heard anyone describe pain like barbed wire. And it's just so devastating that our medical community, they're not helping us make those connections between how is the first period and period every month, like how is that period happening in a healthy way so that you don't have to look 10 years down the line and you're struggling to get pregnant, or 20 years down the line and someone wants to take your uterus out of your body. These are some of the things that we have to address in the beginning. And so I really appreciate that, your consciousness around making sure that periods are welcome. I mean, what does it say? Basically, it's like you're here, but when you're on your menstruation or when you're on your period, just like leave that at the door. Don't bring that inside with you. And so I think it is an important message. I've often shared that I think some of the practices that are really important in cultivating a period positive culture is, one, just acknowledging when you yourself are menstruating. I think this idea that, I don't know, was this like was it like this in school for you? If you had gym class and you were on your period, were you allowed to sit out?
Yeah, we were allowed. Trying to remember. I feel like it was such a long time ago. I'm pretty sure we were allowed. I think it was also just an easy way for girls to just skip class or like leave the classroom. And I think girls used to do it, especially to the male teachers. So I went to an all-girls school for secondary school, but we had female teachers and male teachers. And I remember the girls using that to their advantage, where they would say, especially to the male teachers, you know, I'm on my period, and that would just give them free reign to just leave the class. And you know, because the men just kind of got embarrassed and was like, yeah, and tried to like shut it down and be like, off you go, like it's fine. But I think the girls couldn't get away with it so much with the female teachers. They could to a certain degree, but not as much, because you know, the female teachers kind of understood the, you know, the reality of having a period, I guess. And yeah, it's just very interesting how, yeah, the discourse and the narrative and the way that people talk about their periods, and you know, some people are trying to use it in a certain way. Yeah, so I think we were allowed to leave PE class or gym class. Just trying to remember if it was a frequent thing. I know some girls did it. I don't think it was that frequent actually, but I'm pretty sure some girls did do it. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like, you know, it's other women who are the hardest on each other when it comes to periods. So I remember that my female gym coaches were the ones that were most like, and don't you dare talk about you can't do anything because you're on your period, you know, like they were even more aggressive, you know, almost like, hey, if I can't take a break, neither can you. So,
Yeah.
and then I'm also it's really saddening how even female gynecologists perpetuate this misinformation about the period, about menstrual health, and about belittling it and thinking a period is useless unless you want to have a baby. It's just not biologically true, and it's not physiologically true. And you know, it's a fifth vital sign, right? And that's like an actual statement from the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They said that the period is the fifth vital sign in the female body. So why aren't we learning how to interpret that vital sign? I can tell you what hypertension is and hypotension is, right? Or if your temperature is too high, we know what a fever is. We know what hypothermia is. So why don't we have metrics for the period in every medical setting and office to clue girls in when like, oh no, this is really off. Oh, you know, there are women who literally are bleeding brown and black blood and no one's saying like, this is a problem. Is it not obvious? Or there are people who are having 2 periods in a calendar month. That's a problem. Why are we normalizing? There are people who don't have periods for months. There are women who are calling the ambulance and passing out from period pain, and they're going to the doctors and they're just like, well, it's just like that for some women, and they have nothing to offer but more pain medicine. That's not a solution.
Yeah.
So
I'd love it if you can talk a little bit more to the fact that these conversations we're having together and everyone tuning in who are either parents now or might be parents in the future or who have young girls and boys in their life, because as you said, it's not just girls that we need to raise in this period positive way. We also need to raise boys to view the fact that girls and women have periods in a positive light. I really would love it if you can talk to just how important this is, because a lot of the time in certain cultures and communities, it's kind of like, oh, they'll learn it at school or they'll learn it their own way and it's not that important to talk about, it's just something they have to deal with. But I really would love it if you could just talk specifically as to why it's so important for everyone, male and female, to educate themselves about this in terms of overall health, mental health, because you did talk a little bit about self-esteem and the fact that for girls especially, that's really, really important. Self-esteem, confidence, empowerment, but also health, be it physical health, spiritual health, preventing certain, you know, conditions such as PCOS and endometriosis. And then I said spiritual health because of the fact that I personally believe, and I know you do too, the fact that having a period, having a womb is this sacred gift from God. But if we're not talking about it in that way, it really impacts, you know, mental health, spiritual health, physical health, and so on. So that's what I really want everyone who's listening to this to take away and be like, okay, I'm going to get Chantal's book because I really care about my daughter's education and my child's education about this. but you know, not just kind of leaving it as, okay, I'm just going to get the book and then just leave it. It's actually, this is a, you know, a lifelong, you know, conversation you're going to have with your daughters and with your children.
Yeah. Yeah, that, you know, the menstrual cycle, people think, oh, it's just my menstruation, or my menstrual cycle is just when I'm bleeding. And then that's it. I'm not
Yeah,
pregnant, I'm bleeding. We move
yeah.
on until the next bleed comes along. But we now know that the menstrual cycle impacts key aspects of our body, right? It impacts our mental focus, our energy levels, our digestion, our immunity, our metabolism. The menstrual cycle is impacting us every single day of our lives as women. So everyone has a daily clock, a 24-hour circadian rhythm. But when women start to menstruate, we also have an infradian rhythm, which is like a second clock that we move through in the entire, ideally like a lunar month. But, you know, in typical menstrual cycle, for some it's a bit shorter, for some it's a bit longer. And oftentimes people make these disconnects, right? They say, well, why can't I'm eating the same thing I ate last week, but why am I so hungry now? I must be greedy. Or I'm sleeping as much as I slept last week, and now I just can't get out of bed. I must be lazy. And we have this internal dialogue where we question the reality of our physiology. Like, why am I not functioning, acting, performing, focusing, socializing, and doing all these things in the same way that I was just a week prior? And like a fundamental reality that we're not often taught is that our body is physiologically shifting, right? We have the period of time, we have when we menstruate, and then we are creating a new egg. After we ovulate, right, usually we have peak energy around the time we ovulate. This is peak athletic performance. This is peak socialization and desire to connect. This is peak verbal skills. The biology of our menstruation is, it's always driving us to reproduce. And so with that, if you're ovulating, then all of the things that facilitate reproduction are going to be amplified and turned on, right? Your physical appearance, your skin actually glows more when you're ovulating. Your pore size changes, the elasticity of your skin changes. Your ability to speak and communicate and connect with other people is enhanced. Like I said, your physical performance is enhanced as well. There are all of these physiologic changes that drive and push you towards reproduction, right? That's why all of this happens. It's not just because you're a woman. It's like your body is practicing to reproduce on a monthly basis. Now, after you've ovulated, we're not often told that there are some real shifts that happen, right? Your metabolism is shifting. Your resting blood sugar is shifting. Your resting cortisol levels are shifting. There's this massive shift that happens after we ovulate. It's a shift that you can, even if you were taking your temperature every morning, you would see a rise in your basal body temperature because your metabolism is speeding up, right? Your body is preparing for a potential pregnancy. After you ovulate, you make progesterone, which helps you to gestate. So with that preparation for pregnancy, whether you are if you fertilize an egg or not, or if you're married or not, or intimate or not, your body is still going through this practice. And with that protection of pregnancy comes a lower resting blood sugar, right? Higher cortisol levels, a general mental focus that's focused on protection and caution. And our immune system is also in some cases lowered to protect the possibility of maybe there's a new life inside of us. So our immunity is affected, our digestion is affected. All of these real changes happen, but we are told to do the same thing every day. If we want to be productive, if we want to be successful, we have to wake up at the same time every day and eat the same thing every day and do the same thing every day. But the female body is not the same every day. And I think the biggest disadvantage that causes for us is that we get gaslit. We're being told, well, why can't you be like these other people? Why can't you be like men, essentially, who have the same, generally they have the same strength, mental focus, and functioning. Their clock is a 24-hour clock. If we can't make space for the fact that women are not the same every single day of the month, and if we don't have spaces that allow them to show up differently every, you know, in this unique way as those shifts happen. If they can't have control over, you know, the expectations that are placed upon them, then basically we are just, you know, we're only celebrating one half of her menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle that's very active, productive, and energetic and social. It's like, well, that's what it means to be a successful woman. And when you enter the second half of your cycle, where you are focused on internal work and organization and closure and boundaries and really being protective of yourself, or you're moody, right? Telling people, setting your boundaries, you're moody, you're PMSing, why are you going through all of those things? And so I think that's the, when we keep forcing and trying to override our biology to fit in other people's concept of what it means to be whatever, a great believer, right? A successful believer or a successful student or a successful employee or a successful entrepreneur. When we keep overriding our physiology, I think we just set ourselves up for burnout and just overall like stress and poor health. You know, we won't let ourselves rest more when our bodies need more rest. We won't let ourselves eat more when our bodies need more food. I think that has a compounded impact where we can't even trust our bodies anymore. We don't trust ourselves. Our bodies are telling, like, I am hungry, I need to eat, but we're sticking to diets like they're bad, you know, like that our diet is this keeping to this regimen is more important than like the changing dynamic nature of our reality. And I also feel like if we were able to recognize that women's bodies are dynamic and change like nature changes, right? We don't have one moon phase all month. We don't have one season all year. If we can give space for women to also move through their phases and seasons, and if we can trust women enough to trust themselves and to know what their bodies need, I think it would be an amazingly different world, because women are always being told they need to ask someone else's permission for what to do with their body, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the comment someone's just put now in a nutshell. It's that we don't trust our bodies. And literally just based on what you said, you kind of had this visionary view of the world you would like us to move into. In a moment, I want you to share your book again, and I want to ask you a question. And that question is, what do you see, like if you could imagine every single girl, inshallah, has access to your book in this world and reads your book, and implements, you know, the tips and the advice and you know, absorbs the knowledge that you share in your book, those girls, inshallah, go from being preteens, teens, into young adults and, you know, inshallah, maybe get married and have their own families and have their own careers and businesses and whatnot. Like, what do you see happening to the world? What is the impact on them in their own life, in their own family setting, but also impact in terms of the world? What are your hopes for this book? I know it's a big question, but what are your hopes? What are your hopes for everyone who reads this book? What do you see happening in the world in the next 10, 20, 30 years, because girls are empowering themselves with the knowledge? So again, share your book and what are your hopes?
So it's actually connected to the cover, the cover of this book. So if you look at the imagery, I'll tell you the story that inspired it. So this year in Ramadan, myself and two other families, we went to sight the moon. So we went out to the highest point in our neighborhood, and we were looking for the new moon of Ramadan. And so we have all of our children from ages 3 to 12, and we finished praying Maghrib, and we're looking out at the sky. The kids are looking, and they're looking for the new moon. And all of a sudden, there was this like eruption. They all were like, we see it, and they're jumping and they're excited. It almost makes you forget that it happens every month, right? The Ramadan moon is just like on another level, and they're just so elated. They're literally jumping and like excited and bubbling and just effervescent, and it was so contagious. You couldn't help but feel that joy. And I was like, this is how I want a girl to feel when her period starts, and this is how I want her community to feel when her period starts. There's this beautiful miracle, this sign of Allah that's so evident and so beautiful, and you've been prepared for it.
Mm.
You're waiting for it, you're anticipating it, and then when it comes, you celebrate it.
Love that.
And I feel like as much as we have so much period shame in our communities, whether they're our cultural communities or our religious communities, we start to shift that shame when we can replace that shame with celebration, right? Are we having period parties, first period parties, the way the women of Medina had period parties, right? Shaista Maqbool, she says the women of Medina used to celebrate when girls had their first period. And I also have a friend of mine, and she was telling me about women in southern Yemen who they still keep this tradition. And these are women who trace their lineage back to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's in their culture and it's rooted in their understanding that the first period is something to be celebrated. They have parties, they get a haircut, they dress up, and even though these are very conservative societies on the outside, it's not so conservative that they don't acknowledge the truth and reality of what Allah decreed, which is menstruation is what's decreed for the daughters of Adam, right? This is our reality, and it's something to be celebrated. And so I would say the first part of the vision, so initially this book was supposed to have a white background, but after Ramadan, we decided like this needs to be happening. So the vision is that you see the young lady, she's sitting in a garden, but inside of her is this illuminated, thriving, flourishing space. And that's what I want every woman to feel, that my womb is this fertile, warm, loving, thriving, flourishing space. And if we can approach it like that from the beginning, then we'll know how to support it. So that becomes its reality. And so the vision going forward is that, one, we celebrate menstruation in our communities, that girls and women feel welcomed in all spaces, even while menstruating, you know, that they don't have to hide their period products in these mysterious places, but also that they go on to not be afraid of their bodies, not being afraid of how their bodies work. There's so many women who are just reaching at any form of birth control because they're so afraid of being pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant. And that also comes down to a basic understanding. We don't know our bodies. We don't know our fertility. We have the challenge of women who want to have children, but they don't know how to impact their period in a way to foster their fertility, or they don't even want to have intercourse, but they want to have a baby. And I'm sure you see some of that in your work, where you have women who have this conflicted relationship with intercourse, intimacy, sexuality, sensuality. They have this really strange relationship or this dysfunctional relationship with that, but somehow they want to get to the baby making, so much so that they'll use technology to override this really evident like problem that needs to be addressed, which is, what have you been taught about sex and intimacy that it seems so impossible and plausible for you to find pleasure and joy and safety in it? That's a whole another, you know, book, right? That's your book, A Life of Intimacy.
Inshallah. Actually, so literally there's a few questions. Someone saying, my twin girls are in the process of soon to have their period. We have some physical signs. What advice would you give to raise more awareness and guidance? That's one question. Another person's asking, when is it out? So when is your book out? So yeah, if you could talk to that, like advice on, you know, a girl who's showing signs that she's about to get her period soon, what would you advise?
Yeah, definitely tell them what's to come. You know, definitely the book does so. So this book, it's currently available for order in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, India, and Singapore, and we'll be adding all countries very soon. It's just tech stuff that we have to work out. It's really tricky estimating, you know, the cost of shipping for a self-published book that's not on Amazon. So support your sister.
Please get the book. Get the book.
So we're working out some of the shipping details and pricing, but it will be available everywhere, inshallah. I think the publisher will ship to every country except for Russia and the Ukraine right now. But any other country, inshallah, you'll be able to have it shipped to you. So that answers that one. And it's available on my website, honoredwomb.com. And number two, the question of how, if you see those physical changes, please speak to them. Please start talking about preparing your daughters for what's to come. let them know that their body is going through these changes for a purpose. I find that many parents are scared to talk about why we menstruate because they think it's going to get to the conversation of where do babies come from or how do we make babies, right? But actually, not most children, I haven't seen children make that direct connection yet.
I'm so glad you said that, because literally someone just wrote in the comments, eventually our girls are brainwashed with the words of don't reduce a woman to childbirth or child rearing, because that's the message they get from schools or public platforms. How do we make this a thing for them to embrace their periods, something that they embrace?
Yeah, because it's not just for childbearing, right? Like obviously the I always explain it like this. I explain menstruation to young girls as if, imagine if you see a bird making a nest, right? The nest is a safe and soft place where a baby can potentially grow. And in the female body, I tell them the womb is like this nest. It's this soft, special, sacred place where a life can grow. It's not, all of the eggs you have are not going to become babies, much like every seed that falls from a tree doesn't become a tree. It's such an important process that get to practice it every single month, and that your body refines this conversation every single month. So in that process of practicing it on a monthly basis, you know exactly how to support it when you are ready to invite a baby into that nest. And you know what to do when you don't want to avoid a baby into that nest, right? There are a lot of married women who are so afraid of becoming pregnant, and they think they can become pregnant every month, and they don't know that you cannot become pregnant every day of the month. You need to understand how to track your cycle. And I think I introduce tracking menstrual cycles and ovulation in this book because we need girls and young women to know about their bodies before it's so high stakes. Before it's like, oh no, if I get it wrong, I'm going to be a mom before I'm ready. Like, we need to be charting our temperature when we're teenagers and starting to know, oh wow, I'm in my ovulatory phase. Oh wow, you know, I'm noticing fertile cervical mucus. This is telling me that my body needs more of this and more of that, or less of this or less of that. It's just about body literacy. And I think that's like the thread between your work and my work. It's like, how can we have literacy about our bodies where we understand our anatomy, we understand how our anatomy works, and we know how to support our anatomy in doing what its designed and function is, you know? So that's how I would address that second bit. Was there a third question?
Yeah, there is a question that just popped up now, which is kind of related to what you just said about body literacy. So someone commented and said, in Pakistan, it's a very sensitive topic to talk about sex and periods. Here, the girls of my age came to know about these things through the internet or from friends, not from our parents. And she's saying that that's sad. And I just want to point out the fact that you mentioned body literacy, which is essentially educating yourself about your body. If you just kind of break it down into the fact that a person educating themselves about their body is essentially educating themselves about something that God gave them. This body, you didn't create it. This body, you were gifted by God, by Allah, by the Creator. And so you're educating yourself about this vessel, this body, because it's not obvious. Like, it's not obvious just by looking at your body what's going on internally, because you can't see what's happening inside of you. And so I think, you know, I know that there are cultural sensitivities with regards to this, but I think it's about time, and it's happening already, which is great. It's about time that people just no longer allow those cultural narratives to get in the way of their education. So as much as possible, try your very best. If your parents don't want to talk to you about it, fine. That's not something you can kind of force out of them. But there are, thankfully, good sources, like your book, for example. There are some good sources online. There are some good videos. There are some good social media platforms that are doing great work in providing this education. And so, you know, if your culture or community is not helping you to learn about these things, we do live in a day and age where most people have access to the internet. Most people are able to access and you know, purchase a book and read that book and then pass that book on to their, you know, kids or the girls and boys in their life. I think that if we just stay stuck in, oh, this is what my community's like, we're probably going to just stay stuck there. It's about you deciding that I can make my own choices, even if those choices are hard and even if those choices are against the grain. It's I still have the free will to make my choices, especially if you know inside yourself you're not doing something against your own faith or against your own religion. Because I broke it down into the fact that you are educating yourself about something that God gave you. Therefore, you are essentially, if you have the right intention, you are essentially doing an act of worship, because you are trying to understand this gift that God gave you in order to better yourself, in order for you to have great health, because you need great health in order to worship God well, in order to fulfill your purpose, in order to do your daily actions, in order to pray. You need great health, for example. So if you bring it down to the right intention, hopefully that can help with overcoming that. Did you want to say anything about that point?
Yeah. I don't understand, like some people who take my courses or that I work with, they'll tell me like my mother's a pediatrician and she didn't tell me anything to prepare me for my period. Or I told my mom I have my period and she said, I can't talk to you, talk to your aunt. And I really don't understand. I know that it can be difficult to push through if that wasn't modeled for you, but I always tell people what your culture is what you decide to advance forward, right? You have to consciously choose what you receive that's serving you and that you want to be the reality for your descendants, for your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and what you want to leave behind. Not everything we've inherited is for our best development, spiritually, physically, emotionally. Oftentimes women think like, oh, fibroids runs in my family or PCOS runs in my family. How much of it is just passing on the same habits, the same poor boundaries, the same lack of self-care, the same skipping meals and not feeding yourself properly, not letting yourself rest because you have to earn rest because, you know, you're an immigrant and this is the mentality you were inherited or you was passed on to you. How many of this is that you've just inherited bad eating habits and that's what's showing up as these menstrual health challenges, or just the shame, right? The period shame. You hate your period and therefore you don't give any care to it. You dissociate. You have your period and you totally dissociate from your body because you just feel like you have to endure it and get out of it, get through it, and then come out on the other side. So with that being said, there's a lot of things that we might have inherited that no longer serve us, but we get to choose what culture we want to pass forward, what do we want to take forward into the next generation, and what we want to leave behind. And not everything is worth advancing forward. So thank you for speaking to it. We can't keep blaming culture. We're adults. We're sovereign people, you know, and it doesn't mean that you hate your culture. It doesn't mean that you insult your parents or degrade them. You can still have manners and etiquettes. They can do what they want to do in their households with the people that they are responsible for, but you are responsible for yourself and your people. And if you want to perpetuate this cycle of ignorance and shame and essentially period trauma, you know, that go right ahead, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can change and you can make something different and you can create a different reality for your youth and the people coming up after you. And the last thing I just wanted to say about spirituality, and I have a couple of articles that'll be published soon about this, so I'll definitely tag you when they're published. But we really have to get past this idea that our periods are just this jihad, right? This spiritual battle that we have to fight through every month. And I think we have an alternative way of looking at it, right? If it's from Allah, it's for us. And if we take the time to know how to use the time of our menstruation as an opportunity to get closer to Allah, to take care of our bodies and really learn, how should I care for myself? How should I feed myself? What should I do and not do when I'm menstruating? Then I think we will also see that impact in our spiritual lives, because we really need to stop like I'm hearing these bizarre questions, like and women are telling other women these bizarre things. I know Girls Gone Hajj, were they here?
Yeah, they were. I'm assuming a female is about, I don't know. They said, we love the connection of educating ourselves with Russia. I said she because I'm assuming the owner of Girls Gone Hajj is female, but that was an assumption.
Yeah, we were having this conversation in the comments. I said, you know, we need to stop, like, make sure you tell the aunties, stop telling young women, like, what sin did you do? Why Allah is punishing you by having your period during Umrah or Hajj? Like, where did you even get that idea from, that having a period is any form of punishment? That's that may be a Judeo-Christian concept, right? It's not an Islamic concept. Your period is not a punishment. You don't get punished, right? It's not a form of punishment. It's a biological reality. And the Prophet ﷺ gave a gift, right, to a young girl who got her first period while riding with him out in battle. He was loving and tender with his wives when they were on their periods. When our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was distraught about having her period during Hajj, he consoled her and comforted her and showed her all the other acts of worship that were available to her, though she was fixated on, like, I can't complete my Hajj because of this date. So I think
I love what you just, several things that you said. If it's from Allah, it's for us. I like that you said that. The fact that Allah has given us wombs and a menstrual cycle and periods, those things are from Allah, so it's for us. But I also like what you said about the way the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with the females that were on their period, because it just goes to show that you wanted the topic of today's talk to be raising period positive children, to include girls and boys on purpose, which I really like, because even if there are boys and men who don't experience, there are boys and men that don't experience periods, but they are, with the right intention, they are also able to develop their character and become closer to God in the way that they interact with the females in their lives who do have periods. The fact that they are being kinder and more gentle, more compassionate to the women and girls in their lives when they are on their periods, is a way that that man or that boy is worshipping Allah, is understanding that this is the way Allah created my spouse. If that man is married to a woman and she's on her period, this is the way that Allah created my daughter. Or if it's a boy and he has a sister, this is the way Allah created my sister. And when they have that education of, okay, at certain times when the woman's on her menstrual, in certain phases of the menstrual cycle, I need to be a bit more understanding that she may come across as moody, but actually it's just the different changes that she's going through at that point in time. So it's not kind of excluding boys and men from this, it's including them, because even though they don't experience the physical reality of having a period, they experience being in companionship with girls and women. So that's, I think, really important, because we can then look to our role model, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and look at how he interacted with it, with those girls and women at the same time.
Thank you for bringing that back, because we did. That was on my mind to mention how, because I have two sons, and what does that look like? My older son, he's 8, and so he knows when his sister and myself are menstruating. He knows that we're excused from worship. He's super excited about the book, asking if he can buy it as well.
That's so sweet.
I think it's important, like you said, that we have, just competent men, males, men, boys, like they're going to be, inshallah, someone's husband and someone's father and someone's uncle one day, and they can be allies and they can be supporters, and they shouldn't be ignorant, right? And that's one thing I mentioned in the book as well, is that this book is written for people who menstruate, but even if you don't menstruate, you'll better understand how to love the people in your life who do, right? So even if you yourself don't have a period, you need to know that a period is not a weakness. It's a superpower. It's a strength. And you need to know how the whole world, like how many women, the other thing when it comes to my vision, there are so many women who are really struggling with their periods, or they miss out on school because of it. They're in so much pain or so much difficulty. So one, I don't want to see women having these difficult periods. Obviously, like having a peaceful, pain-free, monthly, healthy, fertile period where you're accessing the full range and hormonal benefits of being a menstruating woman is my vision for all women. But I'm also just mesmerized by, like, women do so much in the world, and sometimes as I work with them, I'll find out, like, oh my gosh, you've been bleeding for how long? Oh, you're in that much pain, and you're still able to give and serve so much. So I'm just like, how much more light can you bring to the world with your joy and your passion and your gifts and your talents, when your period is just helping to amplify that? And I am in full support of women resting when they have their period, but not because you're sick and like feeling like you're dying. I'm in support of you resting, because that's how we honor the period, and that's how we rejuvenate ourselves for the month to come. But I'm just like, imagine if our hormones are in balance and we are having these healthy regular periods and honoring these different phases of our cycle, then we know which skill and which strength we have at that given phase and when to turn it up and bring that to the work that we're doing. And we know when the other strengths of our menstrual cycle, the introspection, the deep analysis, the like real retreat and inward intuition, there are times of our cycle where those are amplified too. So I just imagine, like, how much brighter can we shine in the world, and how much more we can amplify our work in the world, where our period is also an ally on our team. It's also at the table and a part of how we plan our functioning, how we're moving and functioning. I really despise this idea that we're supposed to be successful and great in spite of our period, instead of bringing our period to all of that greatness that we have to offer, not just enduring it and suffering through it, and ignoring it, so.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So not striving to be successful in spite of our period, striving to utilize our period and our menstrual cycle to help us fulfill our purpose and to achieve success in the different areas of our life, inwardly and outwardly, because of our period and menstrual cycle.
Yeah, I just saw okay, how do I start the conversation with my 9-year-old about period? Do I mention blood being involved? So how I explained it to my daughter when she was probably around that age or a little younger, I explained it to her that, everything inside the human body is nourished by blood. So when that nest is emptying and shedding every month, it looks like blood, but it's not the kind of blood from being cut or injured. Menstrual blood is the blood that gives life. This is the blood that nourishes a tiny egg so that it becomes a human being. This is the blood that cleanses your body. And it's like, our menstrual blood is amazing. It has stem cells. It's antibiotic, antibacterial, antifungal. It's healing and nourishing. So I do mention that it's the blood that comes out, but it's important to make the distinction. This is not the same blood when you like cut your finger or you get injured. What happens to our biological clock when we are pregnant? Do you still have the winter and spring phases? During pregnancy, it's kind of likened to an autumn phase in terms of hormonally, but there's different hormonal shifts. So you don't go through the monthly cycle in the same way when you're pregnant, because you're going through a larger hormonal cycle where you're making lots of progesterone and lots of estrogen. But moving from, sometimes people liken different trimesters of the pregnancy and then the postpartum as seasons. And so some would look at the postpartum as almost like a menstrual time where there's bleeding and shedding, and there's different ways of looking at it, but it's not the same monthly clock. And then in terms of buying the book in the UK, you can go to honoredwomb.com. Those are the only questions I see on my side.
I think all the links are in your bio for anyone who wants to purchase the book, which I highly, 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 highly recommend everyone doing. Just go and get the book. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are women, and they may have already done this, but if there are women who read the book themselves, even though it's aimed at pre-teens and teens, if there are women who read the book and learn so much from it, so get the book for any girls in your life, whether they are your own daughters or you have nieces or you run a school, whatever it may be. Get the book for the girls, but also read it yourself, because I wouldn't be surprised if you also learn lots from it as well. And I really can't wait to get my copy. I think I might read it first before I give it to my daughter.
Please. I keep telling people, you're the first period education, right? They live with a bleeding, menstruating woman. And so how you respond, how you care for yourself, how you don't care for yourself, the face that you make when you see your period started, the body, like everything about you, they're learning from, right? They're learning what their inner narrative and story should be about menstruation from you. So even one woman said, is this like a one-time book, or is it going to be here for years? Inshallah, it will be here for many years, but don't wait until your daughters are teens. Like, if you don't have a peaceful period, start putting it into practice now, because you're that lived reality and that lived experience that they can draw inspiration from. Someone said people start to give birth control to young girls, teenagers, so they don't get their periods in Umrah. I think people need to understand how their menstrual cycle works before they start messing with it. I think that's important. Girls Gone Hajj said, yes, we're 4 women. One of us menstruated on Hajj. Okay. Keep up the good work. Always, may Allah Almighty guide and protect both of you anywhere you find yourself. Ameen. Ameen. I don't want to keep you longer than you have. We love the connection of educating ourselves with worship. Yeah. Alhamdulillah, it's all for us. And then Auntie Tamara, Dr. Tamara Gray, or Tamara, sorry, she always says, you know, don't call, I don't know, did you grow up hearing people call their period ijaza? Like
No,
Anafi ijaza?
no,
Like I'm on holiday when they have their period. The masjid that I
no.
used to attend, that was like a big thing. When a woman had her
Okay.
period, you'd be like, oh, Anafi ijaza, like I'm on
Yeah.
holiday. And so Dr. Tamara says, no, say it's my dhikr week, you know.
Oh,
This is
nice,
my week of dhikr. So she
nice.
has her students, they make these really beautiful baskets that has like um, either books of dua or English translations of the Quran or
Mm,
tafsir, like a nice prayer, like, you know, even though they're not praying, it's like their little dhikr
yeah. Cozy
bundle,
corner that they
pamphlet.
can go and grab that basket and pull something out of it.
Yeah,
I like that.
and
Nice.
prepare for their khalwa. You know, you should see your period as a time of like spiritual retreat of khalwa and
Yeah.
reflection, deep reflection. Even the part of your brain that's responsible for intuition is very heightened when we menstruate. So it's a time for deep spiritual introspection.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you've seen most of the comments, so I think we've gotten
There's
everything. Inshallah.
two that are not related, but I can just mention them. There's two that I'm seeing
Okay.
that it's towards the bottom of the comments. One person is saying, is it important to stay home and not meet people during like postpartum, to not go out? The other person is saying their 19-year-old really suffers with periods. Should I get her tested for fibroids? Those
Mm,
are the two questions I saw.
I see it now. Um, the postpartum period, it's really important to rest. I think when we don't see value in resting after giving birth, we don't see the work of
Mm,
nurturing, growing, and birthing an entire human being that you basically grew with from your blood, brains, and bones, right?
yeah.
Like literally, we pour our resources into children, and so the postpartum period universally is a time for deep rest.
Yes.
Traditionally, women would rest a minimum of 40 days,
Hmm.
some for even more months. And that rest is not just like a luxury, or it's not just for women who have difficult births or certain kinds of births. It's for every woman. Literally, your
Hmm.
body is closing itself back up. Your organs are shifting back into their place. Your joints are cementing back into place after stretching and expanding so much. So yes, it's very healing for both the mother and the baby because they are a dyad, they are one.
Hmm.
After birth, it takes the baby several months to realize that they're an entity separate from their mother. So whatever you would give to that baby, give to a new mother. It's
Hmm.
not a self-care time where like, what do I do for myself as a new mom? It's a community care time. So the community needs to be mothering the mother in the same way the mother is mothering the
I
baby,
love,
keeping the baby warm, fed, nonstop food,
I love that.
fed,
Yes.
you know, swaddled, held, loved, listened to in a quiet, safe environment. That's how a mother fully integrates the massive changes she goes through to become a mother on a spiritual, physical, psychological, and emotional level. And that's how her and her baby integrate to life outside of the womb, where they're going to be physically two separate entities and no longer just one. So,
That's
yes, it's
beautiful.
important to stay home. Suffering with the period, you know, I don't think that's the first intervention is to get tested for fibroids. I think the first intervention with a difficult period is, you know, talk to someone, you know, reach out to me, let's
Mm,
talk. You know, why is she having,
yes.
what does it mean? Why is she having a difficult period and what can she do to relieve that? Whatever you do to improve and have a healthier period is going to improve whatever condition is making the period
Hmm.
unhealthy. So
Yeah.
it's going to help relieve the fibroids if that's what she has. But I'm not a big fan of like something's wrong and we're going to stick ultrasounds and, you know, probes and swabs and speculums and all of these things in people in women's bodies. There are many gentler ways to intervene in a very positive and effective way without being invasive, because that's its own source of trauma for some women that, you know, something is wrong and then they have to go to a doctor, spread their legs and have a speculum inside of them. I mean, if that's what you want, go for it, but that's not the only way. That's not the only way to know how your womb is.
Yeah.
My girls ask me why I don't pray. They're 4 and 3. How can I tell them about periods? You know, I used to tell my kids that Allah gave me a special type of worship right now that's internal. And so I'm excused from the prayer because my body has its own type of worship that Allah gives women every month. Auntie Tamara encouraged us to complete 70,000 istighfar during our dhikr week too. She gives us an alternate prayer schedule to follow during our period during the annual Pilgrims at Home game, mashallah. Yeah, there's so much ibadah. Like this Ramadan, there were so many women just like, oh no, I missed Ramadan. I missed the first week of Ramadan because I have a period. And it's like, you're alive to see the blessed month of Ramadan. Like, what do you mean you've missed it? The month is a blessing for all of us, whether we fast or pray or we don't, you know, like you're still getting so much reward. You're actually getting the reward of praying when you're not praying because you're being obedient.
How beautiful is that? How special is that, that you get the reward of praying even though you're not praying? And someone just asked, what are the other ways? So you said that there are other ways to engage in worship when you're on your period. Someone's just asked, what are some of the other ways?
Oh, I thought it was about other ways to check if you have like mental health issues. But yeah, other acts of worship, I mean, other than dhikr, there's reflecting. I think it's a powerful time. I had a post about drawing closer to Allah in Ramadan while menstruating or through the menstrual cycle, something along, it was called cycle syncing in Ramadan. And I think the menstrual phase is a really great time to reflect. Like it's a time of deep reflection. So whatever you've read or memorized, like really deeply understanding it and integrating, reflecting and journaling on it. You know, obviously rest is an act of worship. If you intend your rest as an act of worship, rest is an act of worship. You don't have to be doing things all the time to be in a state of worship. You can intend rest to nourish your body and to care for your body and take the reward of that.
They've actually just clarified. They mean other ways to check. You were right in there.
About fibroids and stuff. Yeah. You know, I would say, well, sometimes people know, I personally don't think that a diagnosis of fibroids, from a medical sense, when you're diagnosed with fibroids, they make the decision of, are they big enough for us to do surgery or not? If it's not big enough for surgery, they'll often tell you to leave it. If it's causing something else like irregular bleeding, they may give you birth control. But there's a whole world of alternatives beyond that for fibroids if you do have them. But if you have symptoms like heavy bleeding or irregular bleeding, then, you know, there are practitioners. You know, I'm a vaginal steaming practitioner, so that's something that I'm trained in how to address. I often work with acupuncturists. They're really great at helping women with different period issues. There are so many alternative care providers. So if you're going to your doctor and you're not getting a real solution or a real understanding of your body, I also put like a whole, you know, list of different practitioners you can reach out to, including homeopaths, functional medical practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, Ayurvedic practitioners. Alternative medicine has really comprehensive tools of understanding the period holistically. Can we recite Quran on mobiles while periods? You know, whoever you take information from, or, you know, it's not holding a mushaf is the basic answer. But yeah, you can recite the Quran. You can recite what you've memorized. You can recite Quran as dhikr while menstruating. Spotting between periods normal? No. Is it not healthy? Yes. And some black material comes out. Is it impure? You'd have to talk to whoever. It depends on what fiqh you follow. It depends on the number of days that you, if it's considered istihad, that's a fiqh question. So yeah, it would depend. But please explain your degree again. You can go to my bio on my website. All of my training is there. But I don't want to keep you. We've passed the hour mark. So inshallah, let's wrap up here. Thank you so much, Amir. I'm so mad I still can't see you. But inshallah, I'm going to watch the replay.
You've done an amazing job, given the fact that I can see you, but you can't see me. So you've done really well.
I'm going to watch.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. As always, whenever I talk to you, whether it's publicly like this or privately, I learn so much from you, alhamdulillah. That's why I said I'm so excited to get your book. And like I said, I'm probably going to read it first before my daughter and then excitedly give it to her. And I'm in the process of like compiling her kind of period kit, because as I mentioned, she has a period kit already. she takes some things to school with her every day, and she has like a basket at home. But this is definitely going to be added. But I want her to not just keep it in the basket first, actually read it. So I always learn so much from you. And I really hope lots of people get your book for themselves and for the girls and boys in their life, and yeah, just really benefit. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation with you.
No, and I'm so excited. I love talking with you as well, and I'm looking forward to your book, reading your book, A Life of Intimacy. I know that's also going to be such a great resource for women, for all kinds of folks, you know. What I wanted to say, someone did ask me about a first period kit. So my book is for preteens and teens. It's the reading levels is appropriate for preteens and teens. It's not like a primary, not like a 5-year-old wouldn't understand it, but preteens and teens would comprehend it. But it's really for all women. I think every adult woman really should be familiar with this information. But I wanted to bring up the point about the period kit. Someone asked what to include in a first period kit. Definitely have non-toxic period care products. Please don't grab your conventional stuff off of the supermarket shelf if you have an alternative, because they often have different chemicals. They're bleached cotton, there's dioxins and scents and fragrances and things that really shouldn't be near a healthy vulva. So definitely invest in either non-toxic disposable or reusable products or combinations until she figures out what works for her. I think journals are really helpful to physically, to actually track a calendar when their period is coming, but also note what they observe. What do they notice about their mood, their body, different changes, and keeping track of their menstrual cycle and how they feel through the entire month. I'm also a big supporter of having herbal teas. So teas like ginger and chamomile and red raspberry leaf are really great teas to have during the period. It's nice to have like a whole thing that's just for the period time, like dark chocolate that's just for the period because it's rich in magnesium, and that's a really nice treat. I like Epsom salts because sometimes period pain can be relieved. Sometimes we just don't have enough magnesium, so soaking your feet in Epsom salt or taking the Epsom salt bath can help to relax muscles if there's a lot of tension, or even like leg pain and other kinds of pain. I also really love to have something warming, like some people will put ginger tea, but also like ginger candies if you want. If you want like an advanced first period kit, you could put a basal body thermometer in there so they can kind of see if they notice their temperature changing after they ovulate. And this is one thing that I don't know if other people do it, but I like the idea of period socks. So it's really important to keep so there's a connection in traditional Chinese medicine between your womb and your, the temperature of your womb and the temperature of your feet. So women who tend to have cold feet and cold hands tend to also have low basal body temperatures, as well as a cold womb or a stagnant womb. And so oftentimes they'll have cold feet. So warming your feet actually helps the blood flow to your womb so that your womb is warm. And if your womb is warm, then your blood is going to be flowing better. So you have less chance of the cramping and clotting and brown blood, black blood, and pain. So I like the idea of period socks because it just kind of clues you into make sure I keep my feet warm when I'm on my period. And then if you want to be,
I did not know that. And thank you for sharing that, because I sometimes have cold feet myself, and just thinking I live in the UK, which is cold a lot of the time in the year. And so just now thinking of, okay, I'm going to get some special period socks for my daughter and even for me. So nice. I like that. Thank you for sharing that.
You can have your period socks, and then, and just with that, encouraging her to prioritize warm things while menstruating, warm foods, warm drinks. So try to save your boba. We also go for boba tea dates. Save your cold drinks and what have you for other times. And if you want to be fancy, I would put an eye mask, a sleep mask. Because protecting your sleep is also a big part of protecting your hormones, and you actually, your melatonin production impacts your hormonal production. So it just really fosters the idea of sleeping really well and really deeply while menstruating, so you can have hormonal health. And you can catch the replay if you missed something I said, because we're really over time now. So
thank you so
all
much.
right, well, thank you so much.
I really enjoyed this.
Thank
you for your time.
We'll have another conversation soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
to further this discourse. But looking forward to seeing you with the book. I can't wait
Inshallah.
to
Inshallah.
see you
Thank
with
you
the
so
book,
much,
inshallah.
Chantal. Have a
All
lovely
right, have
rest
a
of your
good
day.
day.
Take care.
You
Assalamu
too.
alaikum.
Juma Mubarak. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.